Establishing connection to Science Night. Please stand by.
Back to another edition of the Science Night podcast. My name is James, and with me, as always, is Steffi.
Hey.
And Jason.
Hello.
Tonight, we're solving the problem of a famous tropical triangle, discovering stress secrets, and in the second half, we're going to have a good old-fashioned talk about publishing science in our own journal club. There's a lot to cover, so let's get to it. On December 5th, 1945, 5 Avenger torpedo bombers left a naval air station in Fort Lauderdale under the leadership of Lieutenant Charles Taylor and given the designation of Flight 19. They were expected to do a routine training run around the Caribbean before returning to Fort Lauderdale. Let's just round it up and call it a 3-hour tour. Turns out they were actually heading straight into one of the most enigmatic areas in the Atlantic, the Bermuda Triangle. There have been hundreds of explanations for strange happenings in this part of the ocean. Sea monsters, interdimensional beings, a weak part of the veil. All we know is that on 3:45 p.m., a terrified Lieutenant Taylor radioed speaking his last words, "Can't see land," with another flyer later saying everything is wrong. We'll never be sure what happened on this fateful day, but the loss of Flight 19 as well as other unexplained disappearances has given the Bermuda Triangle an air of mystery. However, it looks like Australian scientist Karl Krushelnitsky, in partnership with the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Association, or NOAA, may have found the answer. Turns out it's just clever marketing from Big Bermuda Triangle, and that in no way more disappearances happen in this part of the ocean than anywhere else. Noting that while it is a tricky area to navigate, and there can be some compass anomalies, this kind of happens everywhere in the ocean, and it's not a big deal. So what do you think about these fun statistics getting in the way of our fun, spooky stories to tell in the dark?
I think that was a really great intro.
Right?
I loved it. I loved it. It was so good. I love mysteries. Like, I'm fascinated by mysteries, and I think a lot of people are too. So when you have things that are kind of unknown and you can kind of weave this tale and kind of draws you in. But in reality, nature is mysterious and just like, it's just natural that we have these places that have different weather conditions or, than we're used to, which makes piloting and, navigating planes maybe a little bit challenging. So it can be explained, but also
you hate when it is, right?
Right. It takes away the mystery. That's the point, right? So, we can romanticize mystery, but when there is data that flies in the face of it, right?
Yep.
We're able to take that information and apply it in a different scenario here and understand that, okay, it's not a conspiracy theory, but not everyone's equipped to do that.
Yeah. What's the paraphrasing of the Huxley quote that I'm going to try to not butcher? Like, beautiful hypotheses ruined by ugly data.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I think he said it more British, but,
Probably.
But yeah, it's just you get a large volume of traffic in that area, and it's a tricky area to navigate because you have the Gulf Stream that introduces these changes in weather, and then you have a lot of islands there, so it's just complicated to navigate.
And just like reefs everywhere. The Caribbean is noted for just having reefs that are not charted because there's so many of them, and that's why there's lots of pirate ships at the bottom. Well, other wooden ships too, not just pirates. The cool ones are the pirate ships, though. The only ones I care about are the pirate ships.
Well, cool, unless you're the victim of the pirates, and then maybe not so cool.
I don't know if you watched Our Flag Means Death.
I haven't.
Yes, I did. And now
It's
we're gonna
good.
I love it. We're gonna pilot our 20-part series on Our Flag Means Death.
Our Flag Means Death.
Yeah.
Speaking of pirates, right? It would be hard for us, and I know maybe it's hard for you too, James, to acknowledge that Pittsburgh's in first place in the NL Central.
I was waiting for a baseball reference. Good. We got it.
Different division, so I don't really care that much, but it is tough to see like not both teams in Pennsylvania, because at least we had that, right? Both teams in Pennsylvania
True.
were bad. It was just like it has to be the Keystone State. It's not Philadelphia. It's just Pennsylvania. The Commonwealth is letting us down. But now, when Pittsburgh's doing good, Philadelphia is not. I want to talk about Bryce Harper's back. Everything's fine. It's all fine. The
The NL
Sixers
Central
are
is all
gonna
messed
blow
up.
it again.
It's not the finals, is it?
Oh, it might be if they don't win Sunday. It's 3-3, game 7.
No, I
against
mean
Boston.
this is not the finals though, right? This is
Well, so Philadelphia has not gotten out of the second round in like 10 years, so it's kind of our finals.
I get it. No, I get
Yeah.
that, but I just
Oh.
wanted to point out that like it would be such a Philadelphia thing to happen.
I don't want to talk
lose
about Jason.
all
I don't want to
three
talk. I
major, professional sports championships in the same
can't
year.
open my heart to that.
That would be amazing.
No,
That would
it
be a
wouldn't.
Oh
mystery.
my gosh. And I have to tell you, as a Kansas City fan, even though we won the Super Bowl, I would give anything to have my teams lose in every championship
No, you wouldn't.
What?
in the same
You
year.
don't
I
want-
would, because
What?
that
Don't
means my
want that.
teams have finally made it to the
You-
championships.
You
Oh,
don't want that
okay.
evil on you.
I got it.
You think
Right.
you want that, Jason, but you don't. I promise you. I'm a broken husk of a person.
Yeah, all right.
RuPaul's Drag Race
Ugh.
All Stars starts tomorrow or tonight, I
Nice,
think.
nice.
Just
At
so you
least we
know.
got that,
So-
right?
Is there a
We
pitch
have
clock
that.
in that?
You know,
No.
speaking of all these things that cause me stress, Philadelphia sports, debunking Bermuda Triangles. Let's move on to our next story. So a few weeks ago, Jason lamented the death of baseball, citing changes to the game like larger bases, bigger swings, and an overall abandoning of fundamentals. But what you didn't hear, dear listener, is Jason waking in a cold sweat, taking to Discord, furious. He didn't even complain about the pitch clock. Luckily, our next story just fell right into my lap. In a fantastic article, oh my God. My diction is the Philadelphia sports of podcasting right now. It's just falling
It's
apart. in
that
the
time
finals.
of year. It's a rough time.
In
time
a
of morning.
fantastic article
Yeah.
for Fast Company by the incredible Sean Blaylock, cognitive scientist and president-elect of Dartmouth College. So my future boss, she used the pitch clock to frame a larger discussion. She used the pitch clock to frame a larger discussion about burnout. In it, she talks about the exciting potential for the pitch clock, stating it could make pitchers and hitters more effective because they have less time to overthink, fending off the dreaded paradox of choice. Meaning, if you have extra time and options, it's most likely going to lead to diminished effectiveness. So before I let Jason share his own wrong opinion about the pitch clock, I just want to congratulate President-elect Blaylock for this inspiring, maybe even courageous article. And I look forward to working with you to move Dartmouth forward. Go Big Green.
I don't have a problem with the pitch clock per se.
Oh,
I don't, which is why I
Is it-
didn't rant about it.
what about the height
Because-
of the pitcher's mound?
Yeah,
That
the height of the
changed too.
pitcher's mound, that's different. That's a different issue,
Okay.
right? I
Steffi, are
mean,
you just Googling what changed in baseball?
no, she's just goading
I
me is
just
what
got
she's doing.
into a big discussion 3 nights ago at a theory conference, and I just brought out all that energy and looked at more
Oh.
stuff. Sorry.
Steph, you make me so proud.
I know.
Think of all the
I don't
references
have
you
a
now.
big problem with the pitch clock. I
Right.
don't. But I do have a big problem with the title of this article we read.
Yeah,
Because,
it was not really telling you anything, was it?
well, so the title here is A Cognitive Scientist Explains a Secret to Combat Stress and Burnout. And none of what was in here had to do with stress or burnout. It had to do with the ability to perform under a time constraint, right? And effectiveness under a time constraint. Now, maybe that leads to stress, but it doesn't tell you how to combat stress. But more importantly, as your future boss indicates here, there's an issue here, right? And that is, you could be more effective if you are working under a time constraint all the time, but that might burn you out more. And
Yeah.
that would scare me, right? If I heard my future boss saying, this is what you should do. right? I'd be like, do you know what burnout is?
Well,
Like, I can't even set the pitch clock. That's what burnout is.
sure.
I can't even like get to the field
Right.
sometimes.
And I think maybe the thing that we should note is that she was talking about like highly skilled, highly trained people, and the pitch clock specifically for MLB players. Like if you put a pitch clock in Little League, it's gonna be chaos.
Right. No, you're right. But I mean, I'm operating under the assumption here that everyone working, and I know this is a huge assumption, everyone working in higher ed, right, is an expert in something here.
Oh, Jason.
Right. I'm making a
Whoa.
huge
You sweet
mistake by
summer
making that
child.
assumption. I know.
I love
Right?
it.
But I have to make that assumption for this to be able to put my head around this
Sure.
one. Right. None of this working under time constraint is going to help with burnout. That was my issue. I mean, I don't disagree with someone whose research suggests and is an expert in, efficacy of performance under time constraint.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't believe that this does anything to deal with stress or burnout.
Sure.
So it does help. Like I do some of this stuff for like class prep because otherwise I'd be sitting there prepping forever.
Right, exactly.
And so I force myself to just work on the class prep for these specific times, specifically before the lecture. My students hate that the lecture is at 8:25 in the morning. I love it because then I get to campus at 6 a.m. and then that's my prep time. Then I teach and then I don't obsess about class the rest of the day.
Right.
So that helps me.
Totally with you.
But then to talk to like the burnout, then I'm showing up at 6 a.m. and I go on campus till 6 p.m.
Right,
on
exactly.
those days.
Because you're not able to shift your schedule
Right.
because not everybody else in your lab has shifted their schedule, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
always. So when I first got here to IU, I was coming from a place where, the day in the lab typically began at 9, right?
Mhm.
But here, it was almost like a competition to see who could get here earliest, right?
Mhm.
So like it was 7 a.m. was late for some people, right?
Yeah.
And lab would be in full swing at 7 a.m. And I liked that personally better because it meant that I could leave. The lab was shut down by like 2:30 or 3 in the afternoon because everyone was done doing their experiments for the day and they were, off to do the next thing. And so I didn't mind that. But when not everyone's schedule shifts that way, you can't. You end up with a
Yeah.
situation like you're in, Steph, where, you're on campus for 12 hours because you need your time in the morning and then everybody else needs your time in the afternoon. You know what I mean?
Yep. It's tiring.
Mhm.
Let's kind of talk about this paradox of choice situation that she brings up, because I definitely at work find myself like when we're in the academic year and we're teaching and we're preparing for students and we're like getting curriculum together and doing all this stuff in the lab and kind of like in the vague I'm academic support kind of thing, you always kind of know what needs to be done and there is a short-ish time limit to get it done. It not necessarily same day, but you're going to have things that you need to do every day and you just kind of work towards that. And then like the summer hits, and I know this isn't the same everywhere, but where I work, we don't teach in the lab in the summertime. So I have this like very long list of things that keeps me busy the entire summer. Please don't look at my FTE, President-elect Blaylock. But I have this very long list of things, but it just kind of has to get done by August, right? So
Yeah.
I come in and I'm like, which thing do I want to check out the list today? And I find myself like drinking coffee and looking at my to-do list for 20 minutes before I do anything. And then I kind of like snap myself back into action. But yeah, what do we think about this paradox of choice?
No, I totally agree. It's like when I have time to do something, I take all the time to do it. When I don't have as much time, I still take all that time to do it. Right. So this is my argument, right? And this actually kind of leads us to the next story. So I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but when we ask people to review manuscripts and we tell them that they can have 2 weeks to do it, that in my opinion is better than telling them they can have 3 weeks to do it or 4 weeks to do it, because they're still going to wait until right before that deadline to start doing it, right? If you set that deadline earlier, then when they ask for the extension, it doesn't get that long, right? But when they ask for the extension at 4 weeks and now it gets into 6 weeks, like that's a problem. My postdoc advisor gave me the best piece of advice in academia that anyone has ever given me. And I'm going to share it now. She said, a paper is never finished. It is abandoned to publication. And she was 100% correct, right? You can tinker and tinker and tinker. And at the end of the day, if you are just tinkering with it, you're not making that paper better.
Sure.
That is in contrast, however, to the data that shows that papers that are revised multiple times through the peer review process get cited more because they're actually better science. That's interesting to me, right? So there's a certain point where you have to abandon it to the peer review process, but the repeated revision rounds actually makes the paper more citable. And that's really an interesting comparison. Sorry, Steph, you had something you wanted to jump in.
So yeah, that's refining the story as is. I see this in like dissertations too, where they are like, I have to have a complete story. And I'm like, science is never finished. We're doing the unknown.
That's right.
And we build on each other. And that is uncomfortable for a lot of people because it's kind of the first time they've gone through this process. But that we see this in like COVID, right? Continuously learning. I mean, I'm just highlighting that part of it.
But this whole idea of uncertainty, right? It's a kind of a hot area in social science research right now, because people have different varying levels of comfort with uncertainty, and academics have to have a lot of uncertainty, and so so to your point, Steffi, when students are writing their dissertations, and they are learning how to be a scientist, how to be an active practicing scientist, they need to get more comfortable with the uncertainty. And it's hard sometimes to help folks get over that hump.
I know.
Yeah, because our educational system as is doesn't foster that, right? It doesn't talk about failure either. And so science is like all failure. We only see the successes, right?
Absolutely.
And that's really hard.
And it's also, I guess it depends on what kind of science you're working in specifically to what I'm going to say. But there's just like so much gray area, and you're constantly working in this gray area in between these like kind of foundational things that you can look back on and compare to. I can see where if you're going like K through 12 and you're just learning like this is a fact that I'm going to test you on and you need to memorize this, and then all of a sudden you're like thrown into college where it's like there's not a right answer to this. If you can make a compelling argument, maybe you'll get a good grade, but you've never had to think that way before. And I can see where talking about like stress and burnout, like that freshman year can be kind of brutal if you've never been taught how to think or how to reason or how to argue or communicate.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. I'm going to add to like one more thing before we go to the next article about make your own pitch clock. So like I talked about that for like how I prep for lectures. I do set my watch for like I forgot what it's called, work 25 minutes and set a goal, and then you take a break and for 5 minutes. So that really helps for things. And then they mentioned something about getting over failure or something like when you choke and it's really hard to trust yourself again. This is where I turn to like the sports side of me, and I do mental management from sports to kind of work through failure if you choke during like presentations or something like that. That can be super helpful, where you just visualize all the things going right and all the things that you have done right before to really put out of your mind that time you choked.
Let me ask you a question, Steph. Do you find that your incidence rate of choking in situations is reduced since you've gotten some improv training?
That is in my notes, actually. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I like pointed at top to this quote, like our brains hate uncertainty, so we obsess in the details that can undermine performance. And that's really why I love improv for this reason, because you're living in the moment.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. You're turning your attention outward and you're not focusing on the inward at all. Right.
Yep. Yeah. So I don't really prep that much for talks for that reason. And like previously, that's where a lot of the choking happened for me. And I would obsess about that just because it is public and in front of people.
Yeah.
But if you do the improv, like that, transformational. It was amazing.
That's awesome.
You know,
Yay.
I think absolutely. If only there was like some kind of group that was doing science communication training with an improv focus sometime in the fall, man, that would be a huge benefit to the world. But anyway,
stay tuned.
Yeah.
I think like famed communicator and just kind of like overall great person Ted Lasso said,
oh my gosh, I love it.
You know, be a goldfish.
Yeah.
Did you watch this week's episode of Ted Lasso?
No,
Yes.
I'm behind.
Oh, it was great.
Oh my God.
The last one I saw was
the
the
Roy
strings.
Kent arc is amazing.
It's amazing.
Oh,
but,
don't spoil it.
I'm
No,
not
no,
gonna
yeah.
spoil it. It's just you're gonna be so happy.
Yes, it's a good
Okay,
one.
good. I need it
but
because I've had a week of. Ugh.
There's a Ted Lasso quote though that just made me like so happy, and it was about the Denver Broncos fan.
Yes.
And I was just rolling laughing 'cause the moment he said something. Growing up in Kansas City, I had this friend who was a Denver Broncos fan, and I was just like, I know where this is going.
I gotta say though, I'm not gonna give any spoilers away about context or anything. I loved every second of that speech he gave in that moment.
Yeah, it was
like,
awesome.
It was funny, but it was like so topical, like such a thing that needs to be thought about more right now.
Yeah, I agree. It was
in
great.
America. You're gonna love it, Steph.
Whole episode was fantastic.
Yeah. One of my favorites.
I just love that show. Okay. I'm excited.
That's all I got. Well,
okay.
I gotta tell you, the one thing that I am not uncertain about in this uncertain world is that I'm gonna need a little bit of a break before we talk about our last story. So here's a message from a podcast that I think you're gonna enjoy.
Can you hear me?
You smell the foul corruption.
Things get a little strange here.
And what about me?
Like, really strange.
Grotesque stench of rotten flesh.
Yet consider this an invitation to our humble podcast.
I'm only just starting.
Just search, and we'll be waiting to greet you with a big hello.
Come here.
And welcome to Pulp from Beyond the Veil.
In the first half, we had a story about mystery and a story about stress. And I gotta say, there is nothing more mysterious or stressful to the average scientist than navigating the world of scientific journals. We're gonna talk broadly about publishing, but there was a story that sparked this idea for this discussion. So the entire editorial board for the journal Neuroimage by Elsevier, who publishes the journal, refused to lower. Oh my God, how did I write? What am I doing here? I'm just quitting.
It's because we're so angry.
It's because I don't have a pitch
how
clock.
much, like 40% profits. The number of F-bombs I put in my notes for this section.
Okay.
I can't.
I'm gonna look at my clock. See, we only have 7 minutes. It's gonna be my pitch clock. So recently, the entire editorial board for the journal Neuroimage, published by Elsevier, they just left because the publisher refused to lower its publication costs in excess of 2,700 British pounds per article, on top of subscription fees, ad hoc article viewing fees, and a ton of other ways Elsevier makes money. And now, before you go thinking they're just covering costs, right? Surely they need to make this money, keep science going. Elsevier banked 2.9 billion pounds last year with a profit margin of over 40%, which is bigger than Google, Amazon, and a ton of other companies that you're probably thinking about. So we're not talking about some indie science zine. So what do we think about this story specifically, but also the state of science journals, the scientific enterprise? Steffi, I'm unleashing you.
Okay, so I'm just looking at my notes, everyone. I write notes for this, and they're just like all over the place. My last note is Why are they charging fucking more for ebooks than printed books? I cannot. I hate everything right now.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm with you on
So-
that.
Get to
This
bring
is
that bleep out.
wild. 40% profit margins
Yeah.
for these journal
It's
articles.
insane.
For
It's
how
crazy.
much, like so much free labor. So
Right.
much free labor.
What I want to know, like, what are their costs? Like, other than the paper, the printing, and then the server space.
Well, they have copy editing, they have production
Mhm.
staff, right? I mean, there are costs. I'm not going to defend publishers,
Sure,
right?
sure.
But there are certain costs that need to be recouped,
Mhm.
and that's understandable. The 40% profit margin is not understandable.
Right.
Wow.
But I will say that it, based on your point, Steffi, about ebook licenses versus printed copies of them, right?
Mhm.
That seems to be where the real disconnect is, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can make an argument that 2,700 British pounds, right, might cover the cost of all of the production side of a single article. I don't know that I buy that argument, but that argument is much more palatable than like the 560 pound ebook license for a 35.99 pound, right?
Right.
Right.
Printed version of a book, right? That to
It's
me, that I
wild.
just cannot understand that, because there's no additional. We've all seen Elsevier ebooks, right?
Mhm.
They're not like interactive in the way that you'd expect
Nope.
an ebook to be, that had that much of a markup and difference, right? It's basically a PDF version of the printed textbook.
Right. They're one step above the iBooks that we make for our anatomy lab. Like,
Right.
and it's not even a big step. It's like I tripped a little bit.
Well, and the thing that's really frustrating is raises and jobs, they're tied to these publications, especially the prestige journals that
Right.
cost a lot of money to publish in. And so not only are we having to pay for this to get like raises, prestigious jobs, but you also have to put in a lot of free labor for these same
Mhm.
like art
Mhm.
journals
Mhm.
to like get in the system. And then I'm going to add on top of all of this, there's this push for like open access science. Love it. Okay. I'm all for it. Right. It costs more upfront
Mhm.
to pay for
Mhm.
that because they're not
Right.
putting it behind a paywall. But the grants that we wrote included those charges to put them behind the paywall because we're like always strapped for cash. And suddenly some organization that I, get funded through was like, guess what? As of like now, you all have to publish open access,
Right.
but we already funded you to not publish that way. So good luck to you.
Right.
Go figure it out. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So you're actually bringing up some really complicated stuff here, Steph, and I'm putting on my editor hat for a second because, full disclosure, I am editor-in-chief of a major academic publication that's not published by Elsevier, but there are similarities in the academic publishing landscape that I think give me some insight here. And some of that has to do with sort of this confluence of multiple things happening all at once. And those multiple things include a White House Office of Science and Technology Policy memo that is instructing sort of the guidance for the future of open science, which is not open access science, right? They're two different things here.
Right.
Open science
Yes, thank
and
you.
open access are different things. Open access refers to how journals are publishing information, but open science is a theoretical approach to science. And the OSTP memo actually is talking about open science writ large, but provides some guidance on how open access publishing needs to happen. And so the guidance revolves around federally funded grants that American taxpayers are paying for. Need to be published in a venue where American taxpayers can read it without embargo. And I fully support that idea.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So that is one thing that's happening. Another thing that's happening is that publishers are changing the way that agreements are made between institutions and the publisher with regard to access. So subscriptions to journals are going away. Individual journal subscriptions have been going away for the last 15 years. More recently, and they started packaging groups of journals together. Publishers would say, oh, well, we've got this slate of journals, and your library could pay us one fee and you get access to all of these for all your researchers. That was awesome for people who had great library access.
Right.
But a lot of places didn't have that, right?
Yep.
And so I've been fortunate to have been at the 4 medical schools that I've been at in my career. 3 of them had really great library access. One of them did not. But I was in the same city as another major research institution that had an amazing access to library, to academic publishing. So I was able to go to the library and use that. That was back when people actually stepped foot in a library still. That doesn't really happen anymore. So they moved away.
We have a coffee shop in our library. I go there all the time.
Oh, it's nice.
So the other thing really quickly is that they've moved away from subscriptions to what they're calling transformational agreements, or agreements where they will allow a certain number of papers to be automatically published open access based on a fee that's paid by some consortium. So Steffi and I are fortunate that we're in the Big Ten. And so the Big Ten has a major transformational agreement with the publisher that publishes my journal, and presumably with others too, although I haven't published in an Elsevier journal in a while.
Mm-hmm.
But I can publish almost anything I want open access because I'm at a Big Ten school and they've got this agreement. And so that's amazing, again, for people who have access, but it's actually making it even harder for those that don't. And because my journal is in the education realm, those fees to publish open access, which are, $3,000 US, are really hard to come by when their funding isn't there for that.
Right.
That's about the size of an education grant in my area, let alone the publication fees. So lots of problems.
It's been wild. I've published in journals that I don't have access to.
Right.
Like, what?
Right. It's crazy.
I cannot. I hate it.
Yep.
It's a bit of a mess, huh?
I could go on and on.
I know.
Nobody wants to hear it.
Let's think about this like really big for 2 minutes, and then we'll land this plane. Unlike the Flight 19.
It landed.
What's the bigger effect to science, right? So the theory is you're putting your work out there in a peer-reviewed manner so that science itself can read it, repeat it, confirm it, or disprove it. And the scientific method just kind of churns its way through by having this knowledge out there. So if these journals are publishing and science isn't able to read it, is it actually making science happen? Discuss.
Okay, so I will say from my point, like if I submit an article to the peer review process, I get a lot of great feedback from the reviewers that I very much appreciate, both on like journal articles and grants, to make me think about new things to pursue. So I very much appreciate that. The headache of the system, and I don't know why. Please don't ask me to review articles right now. My heart says yes, and I type yes, and then it's not happening.
Yeah, no, I totally get it.
It's just bad.
Is every one of the articles that you're reviewing becoming a Steffi Horcrux?
No, one is stuck. I just haven't had a chance, but it's just there's so much going on. I'm sorry.
Right. I mean, I actually think that there's something to that, right? People get really frustrated. Scientists get really frustrated when their papers languish in the review process. Rightfully so. I understand it. But at the same time, they're also the ones who often cannot make the time to get to those papers because of all the other competing demands. And so, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy here, right? Like papers will always languish in the review process because people cannot find the time to do the things that they need to do to keep the field moving forward because of all the other administrative tasks they have to do in all the various other parts of their job. And it's crazy, right? All the regulatory burden is important, but it is not non-trivial, right?
Well, I just to review one article like the first time will take me like 8 hours
Mm-hmm.
unpaid.
Yep. I
And then
believe it.
there's multiple rounds.
Right.
Well,
And finding that much, and it's like a continuous block of time too. And finding that is real hard.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I know. Just think of all the great podcasting we could do if it wasn't for this whole science thing getting in the way.
Right.
Well, the bad news is we're out of time. But the good news is this problem's not going to get solved. So we can talk about this for every episode for the rest of our podcasting career. So I think this is something maybe we should revisit with some more journaly people in a future episode. So stay tuned, I guess.
I was going to
Jason's
say,
just gonna
let's talk
fix it all
about Ted
together.
Lasso and Our Flag Means Death.
Yes, we're also going to do that, but we're going to publish it in an Elsevier journal somehow.
Perfect.
Yes.
do
So
it.
GoFundMe.
That's right. So merch.
Yeah. Well, you've come to the end of another edition of the Science Night podcast, but don't worry, we got more coming your way. So make sure you follow us on social media. If you want to follow me, I'm at James_Reed3, and most likely in a couple days you're going to be hearing me talk a lot of slander about how the Sixers can't get out of the second round and how all Philadelphia sports are pointless and we shouldn't even play sports anymore. Anyway, Steffi, where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Steffi Deem or Instagram at Starshippin'. We're going to be running a tokamak real soon.
Yes.
gonna get
Make a
exciting.
tokamak. Yes. Jason, where can we find you?
You can also find me on Twitter at OregonJM. I'm not running a tokamak, but I might be running to the tokamak. I got to
Yes.
see this.
Yes.
We're invited, right?
Yeah, you can come. Anyone.
Well,
Just email me.
you can follow the show at Cyanide Pod and visit our home on the web at cyanide.com for links to all our social media, including our YouTube channel, where you can see our smiling faces in this very episode. All our past episodes, the stories we talk about, the people we talk to, and our merch. Gotta get that Elsevier publishing fees. Come on, buy a 9 Inch Nail t-shirt. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode, but until then, have a great night.